Pope Francis wants to make changes to the Lord's Prayer. Here's the suggestion from the pontiff. Currently, the reading is this: lead us not into temptation. Here's how it could be changed: do not let us fall into temptation. Joining us now, Jeremiah Johnston with the Christian Thinkers Society is the author of this book, Unimaginable. Sir, any idea why Pope Francis wanted to make this change, and what is your opinion of it?
Well, first off, Pope Francis is talking about the modern version of the Lord's Prayer. As you rightly said, Stuart, he's not taking issue with the Greek manuscript evidence that we have. He's not taking issue with the Latin rendering. I really have no problem with it because truly the force of the Greek is that God does not allow us to be tempted, but he can protect us from temptation. After all, Stuart, remember James, Jesus' brother, said in James 1:13, let no one say to you that he is tempted by God. The next verse says that we are tempted by our own evil vices. This is why I wrote my book, Stuart, Unimaginable, What Our World Would Be Like Without Christianity, because without reference to God, there is no moral code, and no one in society would care where temptation came from. It's law of the jungle.
You're a Protestant, an evangelical Christian, I believe. In your church, will you adopt this different line in the Lord's Prayer?
Well, what's so great about Christians, especially in the evangelical tradition, we believe in the priesthood of the believer, but this is also why Christians need to develop biblical literacy. I mean, when you think about it, most people think that Billy Graham preached the Sermon on the Mount, Stuart. I mean, biblical literacy is off the chart. We have the smartest Christians of all time in our churches, and yet the most biblically illiterate. And what this speaks to is, as a Christian, I know that there is overwhelming evidence for my faith, Stuart. I mean, do you realize as a historian, I have to appeal to Roman emperors, Stuart, for the exact same manuscript attestation that we have for Jesus of Nazareth. Truly, we have an embarrassment of riches. And I think it's really neat that in the Christian faith, we don't tell people how to think. We encourage people to think for themselves. Okay. And we can discuss modern translations and how they can get us closer to the original text.
I want to raise the issue of Jerry Brown, governor of California. He says President Trump is not worried about climate change. Listen to this.
I don't think President Trump has a fear of the Lord, the fear of the wrath of God, which leads one to more humility. And this is such a reckless disregard for the truth and for the existential consequences that can be unleashed.
The governor of California does not believe that President Trump fears the wrath of God. Your comment, Pastor?
Well, my comment is I'm just glad to hear God being referenced in the conversation, Stuart. I mean, as I point out in Unimaginable, in a world without Christianity, no one would reference God. So I'm delighted by that. Secondly, as Christians, we are to suffer with those who are suffering. And as a hurricane evacuee, I'm thinking about many Californians right now who are having to evacuate their homes, having to have very uncomfortable discussions with their children. This is the beauty and the power of the Christian faith, that the scriptures tell us, Stuart, that God brings beauty from ashes. And I want to say this to the people of California. God's plan is not canceled by the trials that you're facing. But I also want to say this to Governor Brown. We should also fear the Lord about things like integrity, things like the fear of human life and dignity, and preserving human life and dignity at all ages for all reasons. And so I think that reference to God is helpful in this discussion, Stuart.
Pastor Jeremiah Johnston was the man who successfully evacuated during the great Texas flood, as I recall, evacuated safely. And our prayers were always with you, Jeremiah Johnston. And thanks for joining us again today. Thank you, sir.